Know if you want to be in our heads.
So how are we starting this thing off, Marty?
Well, I'm not sure they want to be in our heads, eh, Kurt? let's uh, let's first get them in the room and spend some time. Let me just preface this, Kurt, with saying that this is an absolute honor for me. We have had the opportunity, many people on this call and on this page, to spend time together in these last few years, regardless of distance, regardless of just as anonymous as can be, and we come together over and over and over, and what's happened is that developed an affinity for people, have developed a love for people, and some of the people are on this room and with me today, and Kurt, you're one of them. And so it's funny because if you said, you know how that question, they ask that question sometimes, if you could go back and sit and have a cup of coffee and a conversation with anybody you wanted, they're gone and stuff like that. If they were to ask me that question about alive right now, who would I like to sit across with and have a cup of coffee and just talk? It'd be you, man. And so, Raquel pops this sort of proposition, and she talked about Ralph and Leslie, where they were just having a chat. It was like almost like an interview. I've spent time with you in the last couple of years, in which a lot of people on this call have, coming to hear you share your experience on the very topic we're going to talk about tonight, and the power. This thing about, of course, we're going to talk about God. But this thing about this transitional occurrence in your life, and this transformative occurrence in your life. So it's why I've been going to these meetings, to when it says Kurt Z, I want to pursue more. You said last night, the meeting, there was good energy. There was a lot of energy, and that's you, buddy. You emit, you bring it, you bring the energy. I'm going to be soaking some of it up today. I might just be here as the sort of, he's like the grand master, and I'm sitting on his lap. I'm like he's turning the thing, and I'm the monkey that's doing the dance. So that's how this should go. But it's just an honor to be with you, buddy, and an honor to be talking about this topic. I want to thank Raquel and Deb and everybody who's got this idea and slapped it together, and that's how I wanted to say thank you and open this up. So where do we go, bro?
Well, thank you. That's um, very touching, and I know you're very genuine in what you're saying, and that's one of the things that I think me and you, even though we've never met, this Zoom platform. I say it like this. It's like, and I'll do it again because I always do it. There's a resonance. Not that. And, I keep thinking, I keep getting interrupted by a thought. Sorry about that. Well, that's exactly what this book's about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Singular. Now, I thought I had a lot of problems. But, this is the thing we address here. You know, we're going to talk about God. Well, how do you do that?
Eh,
I mean, right? How do you do that? I mean, we do it with metaphor. We do it with stories. We do it with sharing amends stories. We do it with allegory. We do it with. You can't talk about it. All we can do is point to it, and point to it, and point to it. And when I got here, I had no idea what I was up against. And let me clarify that. 25 years in, I had no idea what I was up against. Because the condition that I was totally identified as was obscuring the picture. We call it the bondage of self. So this isn't, I'd like to say it this way. This is not a belief system. A belief system, the only reason I'm trying to believe something is because I don't believe it. This is about having a direct experience with God. But when you say God, I'm sure Marty's hearing one thing, I'm hearing another, Cammie's hearing another, Mickey's hearing something, Debbie's hearing something. We're all hearing something different. So I like, this is a quote from Joseph Campbell back in the day, and Joseph Campbell said like this. He said, God is a metaphor. It's a word for an experience that transcends reason. And the problem with us is we get attached to the metaphor and we lose the whole meaning of it all. So this thing's got to be a way of living. It's got to be a way. It's got to be a way of 19 years in AA, and it was kind of a way of living when it benefited me, and there was no integration of the principles in my life. It's funny. I say, you guys gave me a life. AA gave me a life. AA is not my life. And I do a lot, participation and stuff like that, but you gave me a life. This transcends the rooms. I mean, God, isn't it funny, Marty? We go, the lost chapters. Some people refer to the lost chapters, to the wives, to the employer. I mean, lost chapters, that says something right there, right? I mean, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
So, in our book, it says, without knowing it. This is the most important part, I think, without knowing it. We've been brought here by a certain kind of faith. See, I had faith all along. I didn't know that. I didn't know that 30 years in AA. I had faith in the God of reason, meaning the paradigm that I lived in came from a thought process in my head that was based on conditioning, belief systems, old ideas, what I was told, what you told me, what I told myself, guilt, shame, remorse. And that was the whole need for a perception change, a spiritual awakening, a revelatory experience, be it educational or be it instant. Or, somebody asked me last night, do you think it's educational or do you think it happens? I said, it doesn't matter. I said, I've had some huge pops here. But the thing with the huge pops is you got to unpack them for the rest of your life. So they're all educational. It's like this thing never ends, right? Don't you think?
Well, yeah, and the one commonality there, it doesn't matter whether it was educational or whether it was of the immediate variety. They're both sudden.
Yeah.
It's suddenly the ideas and the conceptions that were once held to be true are cast aside and in favor of other. So sometimes folks want to really get into that debate about it. One's better than the other. And anybody who knows my story and I just love the way Curdy talks about this stuff and again, it's kind of where I'm at, but where I've come from is wrought with, and this isn't sobriety. This is for people who are just coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, who are hearing that God word, who are hearing about this power that's necessary and all that kind of stuff. We're not gonna delude you or lie to you and tell you it's not, because it is. It has to happen. There's just no other way around this. It's just this concept, these ideas, this sort of this interference has to occur. But what I do know is that I came here completely unarmed with any sort of idea about that. Because when I was a child, and the way it works for me is I'm born Catholic, and I have no issue with the Catholic Church other than the ones that are commonly known. I have no issue with the stuff I heard in those services. And in fact, I'll wrap around to that. But I'm going through the rites of passage as a child and all this kind of stuff, and I'm just doing what I'm told and following the sheep. It's not a big deal. It's just that's what's happening. And I think I begin to know God. I know of God. I begin to think I know God, but I know of God. And as time goes on, I remember 7, 8, 9 years old. I talk about this sometimes. A young girl in my class had 9 siblings who were killed in a house fire. She was staying over at a friend's house. And all of these children's caskets were lined up in the church that I was brought. And, our Catholic church, been dying and all that kind of stuff, pretty exposed, but would they bring all the kids from the school over to the church to be there for this young survivor with all the caskets up front? And I'm telling you, I can recognize, I got goosebumps right now. I can recognize it in the pit of my stomach. The disillusionment I heard about this God that loved, and that's not what I saw. And immediately in that moment, I dedicated my life to not getting close to this, to not knowing God, because if I could avoid it, I wouldn't certainly want any of that to happen to me. I'm only 7 or 8 years old, and my conceptualization exists like that. It's fear-based, and it's not, it's just fear-based. So all the stuff I start hearing now is bullshit. It's not real. It's like everybody sold a bill of goods. I'm 10. I remember I was 10 years old, and Mom's getting us ready for church. My old man's an alcoholic. He's sitting at the table with a Bloody Mary, and Mom's getting us ready on Sunday morning for church, and she's putting the jackets and the ties on us. And I look up and I say, "Hey, how come you don't have to go to church?" Because I don't goddamn want to. That's why. And I said, "Well, I don't want to either." And he said, "Well, you don't have to." My mom goes, "Jimmy." And that was it. That was the last time I ever went to church. Now, I've never confused this power with religion. That's never happened to me. But I do know in working with others, it's often the undoing. It's a sort of the undoing of this mantra that because my conception of God was very skewed. And so when I walk in here, I don't even hear, you guys know my experience in my first 14 years, I don't hear about the fact that this God is a priority in here. That's not what I hear. Don't drink and go to meetings was the priority. The fellowship was really important. And the way it worked for me was I was probably 6 or 7 years sober. I had not been drinking. I had not been engaged in a whole lot of recovery principles, but my life had improved because the crime had stopped almost. The violence had stopped almost. I was heading in the right direction. It was a bit of a slow burn. But I remember I was in an AA meeting, and then you turn right in the church of my upbringing. You turn right to go to the hall where the AA meeting is, and you go left to go into the chapel. And I turned left this day just to see and the smells were the same. The sensation was the same. That's my childhood pew. And I sat down. And I looked up at the crucifix, the tormented, beaten, battered Jesus torn to shreds, and I started to weep. And I started to remember I remember the biblical verses. They started flooding me, and I remember sitting there having this experience that what they're saying now is making sense. These words that this Jesus dude were saying in the New Testament started to make sense. And like what Kurt was alluding to, pops. I was in a cell at 23 years old, and I screamed out, "I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live like this anymore." And I heard a voice say, "You don't have to. You don't have to live like this anymore." And my whole inside filled up with what I describe as lightness. Not light, lightness. When I stood up, I had no weight. And my feet barely touched the ground. That was July the 16th, 1987. All the stuff that was inside of me that was so heavy and engaged in rage, and it fell away. And I knew I had had a profound spiritual experience. I knew that. And for the next 14 years of my sobriety, I rested on that. I talked about that in all you the old tapes, the old cassette tapes. You can hear them. That's what I talked about is the spiritual experience in AA because I'd never had a big book experience. I'd never had an experience of sitting down and talking with people like you guys on this call about this relationship that Raquel wants us to talk about this relationship with this power. I had no relationship with this power. When I was outside that meeting, Kurt, Mark said to me, he said, see, when he took me up to the hotel room, the first thing he said to me was, he talked about powerlessness. Do you know what that means? And he described for me what it means. And I said, oh my God, no one's ever qualified me like that. Nobody's ever, yeah, I'm powerless. He says, well, you need power. And I don't know where he's getting this stuff because I've never opened the big book, 14 years sober. I'm the spiritual speaker the next day at the conference. I'm the guy who's closing up the conference with the God stuff so that you go home fully charged. And all I know how to do is make people laugh. And they go, oh, that was great. Thank you. You know, and hey, can you come and speak at our conference about God? I didn't even say the G word at all. You know, it's like telling jokes. It was like people eat that shit up, right? And so this is my AA trip. And when Mark said, you got like a Bush League pinch hitter God, you're God. And he was right. When I got in trouble, I called out to God. When I got out of trouble, I took the credit. Self for 14 years in AA is what dominated and dictated my life. Every area of my life was coordinated, structured, and driven by this thing inside of me, self. And I wasn't even awake to it. So when I got awakened, and Curdy, like that's my experience. I couldn't stop talking about that. At 14 years sober, when I began to become awakened in these steps, I couldn't stop about that. And my relationship with God, which is, again, I think what we're talking about here, began to evolve into something. You know, if we could wrap around, I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's something that was real and tangible. And like, I want people to hear what Kurt said, because the reason I listen to you is because I'm much more driven now by demonstrations of faith. I want to see it at work. I don't want to hear anybody talk about it anymore. I've read so many books. I've had so many conversations with men of the cloth. I've heard it. I want to see it at work. I want to see when one man stoops to help another. I want to see faith at work when the shit's hitting the fan, when the bullshit of life, when you get diagnosed with something, when you get your relationships going down the shitter, when you got no money. I want to see that faith come alive in spite of this terrible stuff that can go on in our lives. You're sick, kids get sick. Demonstrative faith. That's available to us here. I don't know what that is. There's no capital G. I don't know what that is. That's the spirit. That is the spirit here that drives it. So you've rekindled some stuff in me with that, Kurt. Like that's why I was so happy to do this.
Yeah.
Take it away. Make some shit up there.
I was really happy. We were both on board with this.
Yeah.
So let me just. It says, the second step, came to believe, right? So that could be something that I do by exercises in the big book, or it can be something that happens to me. It can be descriptive. Came to believe. I'm describing a revelatory experience that transcends reason. And I didn't need to identify it. It was self-evident. It identified itself. So like you said, I knew when that happened to me, and this was one of those experiences. I knew when that happened to me that what you guys had been saying in AA, this thing that produced whatever happened in me, I knew it wasn't me. And I said, this must be the God that they're talking about. So, like I said, it's not, we got to, this is beyond belief. The problem with this is, it is not believable. It is not believable until it's experienced. It's kind of like, going to prison. It's not believable till you get there, right? And you're standing there, you know. But what I think is, Bill Church, we have this conversation a lot. He said, and we really, or I needed to see the condition that was driving me. I was completely identified with the condition, but I didn't know that because you can't see it from the condition. Like, I couldn't identify the problem with the problem. When the solution was accessible, the problem was crystal clear. It was totally clear. And I think we all experience this here. It's kind of like if you have the experience of coming to AA, you cannot quit drinking. Now, I didn't say you could quit drinking coming to AA. I said you cannot quit drinking. And all of a sudden, the obsession's removed. This is exactly the same condition that happened to me with the condition itself. So Don said something to me. He said, well, let me do it this way, the way the prayer says. It says, relieve me of the bondage of self. Why would I be saying a prayer asking for something that I can't have?
Yeah.
See, and what Don said was, you don't believe that. See, you don't believe you can be released from that. And immediately I went to say, yes, I do. And I caught myself. And I thought, wow, this is exactly what happened. This was like the same way the obsession was removed. And people go, oh, you did a great job. And you're going under your breath. Dude, I didn't do this. And you can't explain it to people unless they've had that experience. Because it looks like you produced it. And so this relationship, and the big book's really clear on this great reality is deep down within us. Well, that didn't make sense to me. I mean, because I was coming from the thinking mind, see? So when I first went through the steps, I was given this metaphor. I'll give you two. I was given the metaphor of a jewel. And Joe said to me, he said, look, this is like a jewel. You have this jewel. It's within you. And he said, over the years, you've covered this jewel up with self-pity, morbid reflection, guilt, remorse. And every time you experience that, you put a little more mud on the jewel. And eventually, you couldn't see, you didn't even know it was there. And so I could kind of wrap my head around it because I needed to start simple like that. And then the other was conception. So I was given a different analogy of that, where conception was like if you look at birth and you look at when the egg and the sperm connect, that conception, there's a conception, there's something happens. See, this is kind of what happened with going through the steps, and like this language of a jewel, now I know I don't have a jewel inside of me, but I do know that I'm a direct expression of one will, and I know everybody else is too. I'm a direct manifestation of that will. In another teaching, we say your original medicine. Nobody has your medicine. You've been brought here to find out what that is and bring that into the world. Nobody has your eye print. Nobody has your fingerprint. See, so I could kind of wrap my head around this thing. But when that revelatory experience happened, that existential crisis of unworthiness that I could not get rid of, drinking, making money, doing everything is about mitigating that. Everything. When that dropped, the effect of that was a connection that was always there, but I wasn't consciously aware of it. I was not consciously aware of it. So now I'm consciously aware of the fact that I'm awake, aware of this. And that would be like how we'd say, came to believe would be a description of that rather than an activity that I'm trying to mitigate to make it happen, right? Now, neither one's wrong. It's just stage specific. So, and people like you, this is true. People like you, there are other people in the meeting. There were people that were transmitting something, and I didn't know what it was. But, now I do. It was a sense of peace. It was a sense of well-being. It was a sense of not being driven. It was a sense of connection. It was a sense of wholeness. I saw that in people. Even though I couldn't articulate it, I saw it in people. Don Pritz was one of the first guys I saw it in. This guy, he just had a presence about him. And there's a lot of people that emanate that peace. It's funny, we read this last night, we read these prayers like St. Francis prayer. It says, Lord, there's one translation, Lord, make me an instrument of this peace. Now see, that prayer came out of a revelatory experience that the guy had. It wasn't a means to get to an end.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you take it from there.
Well, yeah. How important is that, right? Because almost when we're instructed to seek, when seeking that is the tool. So it sounds like there's a sort of a beginning point where we're going to go looking, and the idea is that it's all happening in spite of that, because one day you land, and I personally, it's always a shitstorm that sort of precludes the awakening. It's never like any beautiful set of circumstances or anything like that. I recognize God in that, and that's lovely. But when the bad stuff's happening, God's gone. I'm trying to hammer this stuff down and wrestle it to the ground. And then after the pain and the agony of trying to dominate this with self, I realize that I have nothing. I can't do this. And then I scream out. Right? And it's on the other side that I look back and go, oh my God. Oh my God. Thank you. And again, when we're talking about this is the demonstrations, the way it sort of unfolds, the way it works, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Nobody can have your journey. Like, no, and so when it's talking about a power by which we could live, we're getting a little beyond not drinking. And if the desire, the obsession to drink has been removed from anybody on this screen, and you remember what it was like just before it was removed, a day before, a week before, in the detox, in the hospitals, in the jails, and you couldn't do anything about it. Like, you could not, and bang, all of a sudden it's gone. Take as much credit for that as you like. I'm going to suggest something very profound is taking place. In the 6th step, in the 12 and 12, we're reminded that almost every issue we got, why can't that same thing happen? It's the desperation that's going to drive it. It's the desperation that's going to drive us into that place where self is eradicated, because that's the only issue. This isn't about a God of the heavens coming down into you. This is about all the stuff that's on top of this gem that's inside of you, be it the mud, being removed, sprayed, power washed, being removed. You don't even know what's happening. And one day it's like, oh my God, there it is, And so, this lack of, and again, I talk a lot about being 37 years sober and having these things go on. I'm talking about being 37 years sober and having a lack of power. You know what I mean, Deb? A lack of power. And how do I know that? I'm not a drinker, pill fix for a long time. But all of a sudden, life will grab me. And I think it's happening outside of me because of the circumstances. And self loves that. Ego loves that, wants me to play with that stuff, to somehow figure it out and dominate it and control it. And I'm just learning in the last half a decade to relax and take it easy, to slip back into this sort of position of neutrality, to allow whatever it is to unfold, and the power and the message of this God of my understanding begins to reveal itself. And now I've got a message with depth and weight. Now I've got something I can turn around and say to somebody. But I love what Kurt said when he said, we're not going to sit here and describe God. All you can do is you can point to it and say, it's like giving someone directions, right? It's really, you know where it is. It's like down around this corner and then that corner and there it is. And somebody pulls up and says, I'm lost, man. How do I get there? And you say, well, you go down there, you turn right, you turn left. And with any luck, if you have your eyes open, you will see it right there. And they come back 5-10 minutes later and said, nah, you're full of shit. There was nothing there. I said, what'd you do? Well, I turned left at the first turn. I didn't go right. I thought I'd go my own way. It's like, this is really an analogy about how we live. And I was thinking today, because describing this relation is like, and I was hoping or wishing that there would be new people here, that maybe somebody's here that struggles with that concept or idea that this power is so necessary. And I was thinking about the analogy of bread, just a loaf of bread. Bread for sustenance, since the beginning of time, bread for sustenance. And that there's a loaf of bread that is identifiable to everybody. And if you described it to somebody in another country, in another region, in another place, they would be able to understand what you meant when you said a loaf of bread. They would get that. But we know now that there's caraway seed bread. There's whole wheat bread. There's sourdough bread. We know there are many, many, many varieties, but bread is bread. And Mark is the one who said to me, he said, God's just a name in front of the power. That's just a term we use in front of the power, to get the conversation to that place of power, and if you realize that at 37 years sober, that lack of power is my dilemma, then I have to access the power. And the only way to confirm, see, we're in Alcoholics Anonymous. We're in a 12-step spiritual program. And the only way to confirm that I've understood the nature of my powerlessness and that I need power is by continuing through the steps. And what I have come to really land on lately, and I don't know why, and I'm happy I am, because I don't see the stuff in the book until I see the stuff in the book. You big book lawyers and all the guys who are digging in this shit all the time and telling me, quoting pages stuff, I still can't quote pages. But I'm going to tell you something. I'm drumming through this thing at some point in the very recent, I'm talking about sometime in the last 6 months or so. And see, most good ideas are simple. Most good ideas are simple. And we're going to introduce you to a concept that may be foreign to people here, because there's a lot of AA lip flap and party line bullshit that goes on, but there's also this idea in this world that you are the master of your destiny. And that stuff is deeply ingrained in a guy like me who came up that way. So I know it's the way in America. I know it's the way in Canada. It's just a North American ways that you can do whatever you want. You can, that kind of stuff, that message, right? Well, here's a new concept for you. I have to quit playing God. Why? Because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I've been playing God my whole life. I end up in all kinds of trouble. It doesn't work. We got to decide that hereafter in this drama life. Now, I'm talking about a third step decision here, but that decision means nothing. It says, this is the concept that I want to share and that I'm just coming to understand in a new light. I've talked about it for years. Dad, I've talked about this stuff like I knew what I was talking about. And I don't know shit. I don't know anything until it actually happens, until it becomes a practical thing, till it's demonstrative in me. Because I wasn't living this way 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I talked about it when Zoom first started like I was. But this is unfolded. All the delusion and the stuff in my head, the things I think I know, are disappearing. I never took that position. I got smart about it. I got intellectual about my position here. This is amazing. If I don't start crying, I'll be shocked. It says this is the concept, that God is going to be our director. He's the principal. We're his agents. He is the father. We are his children. Most good ideas are simple. This concept is the keystone. That is a subjective relationship. This is not me walking hand in hand with the Lord of the heavens. This is not what this is about. This is a subjective relationship that whatever this power has become, I have to be subjective to it. How do I know that? Well, two reasons. One it told me so, and the other one is it didn't work. The areas of my life where God was not present or where self was all over it were painfully existing. My relationship life sucked. My financial life was of no consequence whatsoever. I had this sort of idea, these ideas in my head that someday I'm going to be rich and famous, and these things are alive in me, and my life operates on that stuff. That's not coming from this power. That's not a subjective position. Now, here's an interesting piece. That is powerful information there, that third step information. And people wonder how to take this step. People ask all the time, how do I let go? You don't let go. It has nothing to do with letting go. How do I give it to God? And it doesn't even say that there. It's like we made a decision to turn our will in our lives, and we made the decision to turn our will in our lives. What does that look like? When we sincerely take this position, what position? That line. I did a workshop for 24 hours on that line. When we sincerely took this position. I don't know what happened in your guys' lives today, the people on this call. I don't know. Yeah, good day, good moments, bad moments. I don't know. But when you sincerely take this position, all sorts of remarkable things start to happen. There is another position you can take, and it's not this position. And I'll guarantee you that when you were in the shit strides of your day today, you were taking that position. You're going to figure it out. You're going to get another sponsor. You're going to change home groups. You're going to get another book. You're going to need more books. Kurt's going to come on here and deliver a heartfelt, open message, what he's inspired to give through the power that exists inside of him. And you're all going to email him on the sideline asking, what book was that again? What book was that again? Because you want to have Kurt's experience. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And I'll say one more thing, Kurt, and I'll put it over to you. I'll give you an example. It's like I was probably 10 years sober, and I was down on vacationing, and you know those little book things where you leave a book and take a book? Mm-hmm. So I'm walking down to the beach one day, and I see this book there that I had heard about somewhere called The Sermon on the Mount. I had never seen it before. I thought to myself, that sounds awful Christly. And I thought, you know what? Maybe I'll give this a little boot. And I go down and I Shays Lounge. You guys have read the book. You know it's a pretty quick read. I lay down. Emmett Fox has got a way about him, and I quite enjoy it. And certainly for the next 2 years, I'm quoting shit out of it at meetings. But it was a nice read. I really liked it. Now, I want to fast forward 20 years from it. Not only have I had a profound spiritual experience in recovery at 14 years of sobriety, I'm now living in the principles of this program. I'm at a vacation resort. And I go down, and you know those places where they have those little books, you take one, you leave one? There's a book there called Sermon on the Mount. And I thought, no way. And I kind of looked up and said, what, you didn't think I got it the first time? I took the book, and I went down to the beach, and I'm on the Shays Lounge, quite enjoying this book. Seeing it in a completely different light. The first thing that I read, and I'm going to paraphrase, is whether Jesus is real or not, let's just look at the shit he did. It was pretty cool. That's the paraphrase. And I think this is decent. I like this. And then it goes into what he did. What he did. What he did. And I had a whiteout. Anybody ever hear that? You remember Kurt said he's had a couple pops since he's been here? I had a whiteout. I came to the book having been read on my knees with my hands on my head on the beach on the Shays Lounge, burnt to a crisp. Absolutely elevated spiritually because I had an understanding of what was being asked of me in this world. And that was to go to the kids. There is no church that I needed. That's not what this is about. It is practicing these principles in all my affairs. Like he said, the forgotten chapters is like, that's all that's being asked of us in our occupations, in our homes, in our lives. This is where we're supposed to take this stuff. The land of discovery is when we have these excellent conversations, Raquel, where we can talk about, that's the land of discovery, where I said, I'd love to be sitting at Kurt's place with that bowl. Hey, they got me one for Christmas too, by the way, Kurt. My family got me one of them things. I can't work it yet. I got to figure out how to. So I just bang the shit out of it like you do, and it's great. I love it. But the idea here is that I'm not seeking anymore. I'm not seeking anymore. And I don't mean to say that like Sandy would roll over in his grave if he heard me say that, because we're seekers. I'm not seeking anymore out there at all. And I love reading. So I do read. I do order books. I love to be inspired by. I finished about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, American Vita. And it's had a very lasting effect on me. Because to me, that was like mainstream religiosity crashing together. And out the other side came these beautiful ideas about spirituality. Religion had absolutely destroyed spirituality in my understanding as I was growing up. But something happened in North America when it became okay to have a different God or a power different than the one I was raised with. And sharing that with you guys in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to tell you, the first several years I was here, if you brought the G word up at a meeting, if you brought that up as a topic, you would clear the room. The meeting I went to was a Friday night meeting called the Wayside Group, and it was referred to as the Friday Night Fights. And we would sit across from each other in all of our leather and all of our criminal attitudes and stuff like that, and just wait for someone to say something wrong and pounce on them. Sometimes there'd be fist fights, and there'd be all kinds of, and it was great. We'd all show up the next Friday and do the same thing again. But God damn it, we didn't drink today. It's like, so, but this was fighting for our lives, fighting for our sobriety. But if you brought up God, you would clear the room. They would say, that's not welcome here. You're not allowed to do that here. And it wasn't like it was an atheist meeting. It was just like, you're going to scare the newcomer. I don't know if there's any newcomers around here. I can't even see how many people are here. 121 people. I don't know if anybody's new here. But when it says God doesn't make too hard terms, neither does AA. It's just the people in AA who try to impose whatever it is. So, like Kurt says, we can't tell you about God. We can point and say, you go that way, you will have your own experience and you will come to know God. And this is what you guys, I've heard this a lot lately, and I don't know why. I've always known of God. And now I know God. Mark said to me, do you want a personal relationship with this God? When we said the third step prayer together, it was the first time that I felt that there was a God that was there for me. There was a power that was there for me. And that's the first time it ever happened. It was through the third step prayer. That's, 23 years ago. And now I look at that experience and I look at the third step prayer as I just explained it to you in a completely different way. It's in a completely different way. So this is the growth and the learning and the experience around this relationship with this God that, and please, new people understand, I'm a mental case. I was like that just like you. I was like that for a long time in AA, It's okay. It's okay. The reason we have meetings like this and people, get inspired to create a meeting like this is so that we can talk of God and we can put it in a perspective where it's not meant to be daunting. It's not meant to scare you out of the room. And the old guys, don't worry, alcohol will scare them back. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not willing to play that game. What I am willing to do is stay with strict adherence to the 12 steps the way they're indicated. Do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe in something? Something. And the moment they say yes, our job is to emphatically assure them they're on their way. And then what do? We do a third step prayer with them. Now, the thing about it is not rushing into that. You got to understand where self is playing a little bit of game here. Self is playing the game. But the idea is, if you already have that today, I challenge the people here again today. I love challenging people because I challenge myself this way. If God is everything, or else he is nothing, and you've made the choice that it's everything, God either is or he isn't, and you've made the choice that he is, I ask you today to reflect, 9 o'clock back, 9 o'clock Eastern time, reflect back today. How much was God a part of your life today? Really? Everything? Everything? Because it's only everything or nothing. God either is or he isn't. And that is about that power. You are the power. Kurt said that 2 years ago, and I sat there and went, that's blasphemy.
Yeah.
You are the power. It's in you. It's you are it, and it's all self, the battle and all that. No, you are the power. I'm sorry, Curdy. Go on, buddy.
No,
Get us back to sanity here, brother.
I'm enjoying this. I'm like, so in our book it says, be quick to see where religious people are right. And I used to read it like this: "Be quick to see that religious people are right." That's how I used to read it. But that's not what they said. They said, "Be quick to see where," and that's that thing. I rang the bell. There's this ability of discernment. You might call it discernment, where you can recognize. William James, he's got a great thing in Varieties. He says, truth doesn't need to be identified. It identifies itself. It's self-identified. It doesn't need your help, right? So if I have ears to listen, and so I started, when we talk about this thing, the book, this is just my opinion, the book is written in a very dualistic way, and it's written anthropomorphically, meaning it sounds like a he. It's written that way. It's just because that's Western religion. Now, I didn't say spirituality, I said Western religion, and probably some other things. But I started to have an ear for this thing because I started to investigate what they said to do. So I went into some of the perennial philosophies, some of the different world religions, and I realized that that finger that was pointing in AA was pointing in other things. And what it did is it gave a depth to the big book that wasn't there. And what's really funny is when I say anthropomorphic, I mean it's not a human being. So when I talk about this thing, I love the way the book says creative intelligence, spirit of the universe. See, I love that it says this great reality is deep down within you. It's not a belief system. This is a reality. So one time somebody asked me, they said, so how do you establish that relationship? And of course we go, well, you work the steps, work the steps, you'll have an experience. But I said, let me say it this way. Let's say Marty, it says God as you understand him, right? Well, that assumes, it doesn't say God as you don't understand him. It assumes you have some understanding of what the finger's pointing to. And so I said to this person, I said, look, if you want to know, let's say Marty needs to know Cammie in Texas. Marty, if he comes to me to find out about Cammie, he's not going to it's going to be my relationship. So I said, why don't you spend time with this thing rather than ask me? Now, how do you do that? Like a simple level, new people, simple level. It's real easy. If I'm a victim of a delusion, and the main problem centers in the mind, then maybe I'd take a suggestion like get a sponsor and listen to him rather than me. I mean, real simple. It's just real simple. Well, that shifted. So I started listening to everybody. Because, Pritz said one time, he said, if you listen carefully enough, a liar can tell you the truth. And Don C. said to me one time, he said, you need to listen to what people are saying so you can hear what people are saying. And I'm like, well, what the hell does that mean? But it would be like this. I'll just use, language is really important when we engage in this. So I got a friend that says, I'm really being hard on myself. And I said, there's another way to look at this. This condition of self is being hard on you, and you believe it. You're not being hard on yourself. You're totally identified as the condition. It's talking to you as you. And there has to be that split, that kind of, you were talking about it earlier. There has to be that, this awareness is the essence of a spiritual experience, or more religious members call it God consciousness. This awareness. If I can see it, I can't be it. You know, and I say this all the time, thank God I'm not suffering from what's not happening anymore. See, most of the stuff I suffered from was in my head. It wasn't even happening. Like, let's just say I got released from a company that I was working for. And by the time I got in my car and was halfway home, I was already homeless. Didn't have any money in the bank. I was starving. And nothing had happened. But see, that was what I listened to for the longest time. So it was crucial that I identified, that I was able to see what was really going on here. And part of that was when you guys started to share, I thought I was identifying with you. I was mistaken. I was identifying with the condition that was driving you. That's why I identified, because you had the same condition. Being convinced that self, singular, manifested in various ways, what defeated us. 116 people. And that split, you know, if you look at Eckhart Tolle, I talked about this last night, his experience was the same thing. His journey began when he realized, he said, I can't live with myself anymore. And a voice came in, and the voice said, who is this self you can't live with? That was the beginning of his journey. See, that was the split. And I think, you know, this relationship, you know, I got a friend that says, you know, it says, we maintain this relationship, right? Daily reprieve. We have a daily reprieve. It's really hard to be far from it if you're it. But where I can be far from it is here. I could be in my head or in this story or in your story, even worse. You call me up and you tell me something, I go, yeah, he deserves it, da-da-da. You know, I jump right on board with it, you know. Like, and it's not heavy. It's not heavy at all. It's, you know, we do our little exercises. I mean, I'm throwing tobacco and sage around, and that's just the way I was taught. You know, that's my bridge to that realm, you know. And does it mean I might get struck drunk if I don't do that? No, that's a fear. You know, you said it. It's all fear-based. Most of my faith was fear-based. It wasn't even faith. It was totally, I relied on a false evidence appearing real. And I had faith in that because, you know, that was the paradigm I lived in. So to try and navigate this thing, that's the biggest thing. When this shift happens to you, if that revelatory experience would have been it, and you guys wouldn't have been here, it would have died on the vine. But that was the thing. See, it was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, I just do what I do what the book says. It says, you know, you get quiet in the morning. Well, that's a tall order for a mind that won't stop, right? You know, it's an instruction that I can't pull off. But I don't need to pull it off. I need to identify what it is. It's like when I'm listening to that voice now, it has no power. See, it's what you said. And it diminishes because it's been identified what it is, and it's almost comical. I mean, it is almost comical, some of the stuff that, you know, that comes up. And I think there is effects of that sense of peace, gratitude, like most of us are grateful. That is an effect of that experience, of that living experience. It's not something that, you know, Sandy, I was listening to a talk of his the other day, and it was great because he talked about the Big Bang. And he said, we think the Big Bang's something that happened. It didn't happen. It's happening. It's happening. This is the same with AA, right? This relationship is developing constantly till I'm out of this meat suit. It's developing. And, you know, you've heard me say it before, I tried to kill myself 3 times. I thought. I was not trying to kill myself. I was trying to kill the self, the condition that was driving me. Big difference. Big difference. And I just think life is just beautiful now. That was not my experience when I got here. You know, when they led me in 1979, they led me out to a meeting in Montrose in Houston, and the guy I met was Frank Beard, the drummer from ZZ Top, and his wife Kathy, and they were counselors with PDAP. You know, this is back way in the day, right? Well, you know, for a new guy, man, I was mesmerized, right? I mean, forget AA, you know, I'm like standing in the presence of gods, you know, like, but, you know, like I said, I had no idea what I was up against. I had no idea that this relationship is something that I think had to establish itself with me, because I couldn't establish myself with it. I could do the little footwork. But when that veil's parted, you weep. You're moved. You're touched, because what you've just touched, or what my experience was, I touched unconditional love. I touched all the things that I heard people talk about that made no sense until they made sense. You know, in the Gnostic Gospels, in one of the Gnostic texts, it says, Book of Thomas. I love this. It says, my Father's kingdom is spread upon the earth, and men do not see it. That was me. It was there the whole time. Rumi says it another way. What was said to the rose that made it open was said to me. All these things started to have resonance, to have meaning, depth, like you said. And to be able to live from that, that's all I ever wanted. That's all I ever wanted, was a sense of well-being and peace. And you know, you guys, that was delivered here in AA. And, you know, the talk last night was on, we're not burning energy foolishly. We don't tire, so we're not burning energy foolishly. Yeah, because I'm not trying to manage and control my life with spiritual principles anymore.
Yeah.
You know? Go for it, Marty.
I don't know how much time we got left, but I really want to say this little piece. The consciousness of God is so much different than, and the awareness of God is so much different than the knowledge of God, and that has to be really, really. I can't tell you about your own experience. It had to be really drummed into me, because again, seeking outward and all that kind of stuff never worked. But when I can tell you where God is, because, and if anybody wants to know, you need to play along with me right now for real. Now, drop your bullshit, and for real, I can tell you where God is, because I can tell you where he isn't, for certain. God is not in yesterday. And God is not in tomorrow. God isn't in this morning, and he's not in 11 o'clock tonight. God is right now. I don't know how Wilson figured it out when he said, may you find him now. Yeah. That little line, we bastardized that, we've laminated it, we pass it around, and we read it at every meeting, so much so that people don't even hear it anymore. May you find him now. Right now, challenge everybody on the screen here. Can you connect to that power? I only have, like, you guys, many of you have heard me speak. These readings and these experiences and the birth of my grandchildren and all of these experiences that pop, 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 pop. They keep me in the game. They keep me fresh. They keep me really kind of alive with this understanding and harnessing of this power. But this is the God's honest truth. To this point, today, to this point, I am never closer to the God of my understanding. I'm never closer to this power than I am when I'm with you. Ever. So figure that shit out. I go to priests and ministers and services and all this kind of stuff. I do sweetgrass ceremonies and run through the woods naked. Trying to get in touch with my maleness. I rub stones and pyramids and all that shit for 30 years. I read books and I go tickle, tickle, tickle. I have these little butterflies and these feelings. And then I meet some professor from university who's losing his family, and his kids won't talk to him, and he lost his driver's license. He shows up at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. He wants to die because he's so ashamed in his faculty. He doesn't want to live anymore. He wants to die, and he's an alcoholic. And I'm just Marty, the ex-con bank robber, sitting across from him, listening to his bullshit, all his problems. You guys who know me know what I think about problems. I just don't believe them anymore. I don't believe in them anymore. Kurt said it. They're all made up. They're all made up. How do I know? Because I'll ask it. Do you remember that real son of a bitch of a problem you had going on February 19th last year? Do you remember that? Do you guys remember that? It was eating your lunch. Do you remember that? No, you don't. Why? Because it didn't matter then, and it doesn't matter now. God is right here, right now. And there are no problems tonight, right here, right now. But your ego, yourself, immediately speaks up to defend that statement and says, oh, well, wait a second, your child is out on the street. Oh, wait a second, this morning, you got into a beef at work. Your mind wants to sabotage this connection, this moment. We are together here right now. I felt it from the time I came on here and saw some people that I care deeply about. I knew we were going to move into a connection. I knew that the power would not let us down, Raquel. I knew that if we could just turn our consciousness towards him, if we could just turn our attention towards him, it's the one way I can undo the bullshit in my life, is that if I'm running through my life banging and smashing, which I tend to do, breaking shit and being upset and why isn't this happening? Why isn't it a goddamn president of the United States? And I go through all the, did I say that loud? I go through all of this stuff, right? And then I turn my attention, turn my consciousness to this power, and I'm safe and protected. Only 100% of the time. So any of you new people, I want to make it very clear that statistically and mathematically, it's only 100%. It's not like, you don't have, it's only 100. It only works every time. It's like, but Kurt said at the beginning, it's not the way it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. We didn't have this. I didn't have a big book. I didn't have the 12 steps. I believe that that's sincerely taking such a position, that he is the father and I'm the child. I believe taking that position, that subjective position, opens me up to do something in steps 4 through 9 that I have never done before, which was look at this. Look at that damage and pile of rubble. And someone posted a real good message in the thread there, that these are the things that are blocking me from a full connection and a full spiritual relationship. That's what's blocking me. And I must be rid of these things. Alcoholics Anonymous has never been about getting anything. It's been about ridding. Problem ridding, getting rid of stuff. Rid is one of the most amazing spiritual words in our entire text. I'm ridding stuff. And when I get, what Kurt said about laughing, he said it's almost comical. When I get on, and you guys have heard me say this before, I'm probably about 60% with my morning get together. Probably 60%. Yeah, God would like me to do a little better. I know this. I'm 100% in the night. 100%. I get on my knees every single night and I begin to evaluate and replay my day. And I look for where I was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened. I look for those things. And guess what happens? I start to laugh because I'm mental. And I start laughing. I don't get down. You know what the book says here? Don't beat yourself up. Don't do the morbid reflection. That's not what happens to me. I start laughing my ass off. I go, am I still like that? I am still a little sociopathic, I think. But I think to myself, tomorrow, if you could find it to be just a little bit better, I'm good with that. But I kind of enjoyed today, God. I may have stepped on the toes of my fellows, but I pretty much enjoyed it. I'm going to be honest with you. And then I get up the next day and there's a little bit more harm, a little bit less foul, a little bit, or I'm sorry, a little less harm, a little less foul. And what I do know is through the 10-step living and through this idea of a conscious contact is that God can only ever be found now, right now. I'm not talking about now in between 9 and 9:15. I'm talking about this moment. So the real trick to spiritual living, and I didn't know that this was hidden in the 10-step, Kurt. I didn't know this. That the real trick to spiritual living is to stay in the now. And things will happen in my life. My children are sick or something, terrible circumstances occur, and I begin to feel the angst and the pain and the worry of what's to come. And I just pull out of the now. And my job as a spiritual being is to have this conscious contact to be driven back to the now. Nothing works better than hooking up with you guys. Nothing. Nothing. All Bill Wilson said that when all the books and the therapists and the priests and the ministers and the meetings and when all of that's failed, working with another drunk would save the day. How's that? Wait, are we blessed or are we blessed? It doesn't even say getting in touch with that God and having this. It doesn't say that. It says work with another drunk would save the day. It always has. I mean, what a gift. What a gift we've been given. And I really hope, like, I'm not, I mean, on a good day, I'm not very bright. And I really appreciate, the way I'm driven through experience on this stuff. But I love listening to you, Kurt, talk about this stuff because you're talking about my head and my heart connection. You're talking about my soul, and you put it in words that I find are just sort of fantastic. So I thank you. And I don't know, where do we go? Where do we go, Raquel? What do you want us to do?
We have 5 minutes to closing, and I'm pretty sure you guys have a few questions in your chat because the chat was only directed to both of you.
Yeah, they're tough ones, though. They're tough questions. I saw them as they were coming up.
You can choose one if you want, or you, Kurt, whatever, or you can continue with the 5 minutes left and
no, it's on Kurt.
Whatever you want.
Kurt's going to answer questions. These are way too hard for me. I'm looking at him going, why didn't somebody just say, is it true that if I don't drink and go to meetings, I'll be good? Why didn't someone just ask that? This is heavy.
I'm looking at this one. It says, hey, Kurt, I was wondering if at any point while young in recovery, if there might be a time where we necessarily have to fight against the urge or temptation to drink or use. Well, I don't know. It was a losing battle for me, so I just didn't. See, that's what I mean. I didn't know what I was up against. See, I thought I came to AA to quit drinking. Let me say that again. See, no, I came to AA because I couldn't quit drinking. I couldn't quit drinking. There's a part in the book that says, I made up my mind to quit drinking. It never occurred to me I couldn't do so. I thought it said they were talking about the drinking. I never heard the second part of that. See, I made up my mind to quit drinking. It never occurred to me I couldn't make up my mind to quit drinking because it kept changing. I could not make up my mind to quit drinking. It kept changing. That was the obsession. The insanity that preceded the first drink. That's a sober condition. Sober. This condition of self in sobriety, this condition of self is what drives us. We're sober. We're not drinking. In fact, the drinking was a solution to that, right? Can I read something real quick, Marty?
Oh, absolutely.
So, this is out of the emotional sobriety. Some of you guys heard me say this. It's like in the middle of, he said, I kept asking myself, why can't the 12 steps work to release my depression? By the hour, I stared at the St. Francis prayer. It's better to comfort than to be comforted. Here was a formula, all right, but why didn't it work? Suddenly, I realized what the matter was. Well, that sounds like a revelatory experience to me. But here's where it goes in the weeds. My basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people and circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I'd fought for them. When defeat came, so did my depression. So now I'm going to read it the way I see it. Suddenly, I realized what the matter was. Self's basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people and circumstances to supply self with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to self's perfectionist dreams and specifications, self fought for them. And when defeat came, so did depression. Very different. See, the first way I read it, I'm identified as a condition. The second way I read it, I'm identifying the condition that's driving me. There's a huge difference. There's a huge difference. So, I mean, it's kind of what we say here. You know, it's like if it's a different perception of the same environment, right? You know, in Chuck C's book, he says, the most baffling characteristic of alcoholism, both to the alcoholic and those who must deal with him, is the conflicts of sober reality. And a friend of mine says, that's not reality. That sober reality is the delusion that I suffer from. And what I mean by that is 19 years sober, my fears had not fallen from me. I could not look the world in the eye. I couldn't comprehend the word serenity, and I did not know what peace was. This is very descriptive of what it looks like to be consciously aware of the fact that you're here, like Marty said, right here, right now. Very descriptive, not prescriptive. It's got to be prescriptive in the beginning. It starts that way. But at some point, it kind of shifts. And, I mean, I just feel blessed. I mean, that's just, I don't know how else to say it. You know, I just, yeah, what a gift. Yeah, what a gift. But I ain't got anything else to say.
I'm saying we just dropped the mic. I actually unmuted me. That was just like perfect. Okay, so we're gonna stay here for a few minutes after we close the meeting for whoever